This second session has a special theme, African transport efficiency and viability with intermodal solutions. Je crois que nous avons eu au cours de la première session déjà abordé cette question de la multimodalité et nous savons très bien aujourd'hui que le rail est confronté, n'est-ce pas, à l'agressivité de la route et tout au long du débat, on a posé la question, il faut savoir pourquoi on parle moins du chemin de fer que du rail. Aujourd'hui, n'est-ce pas, avec ce panel, nous allons débattre, n'est-ce pas, des questions liées à des solutions intermodales pour essayer, n'est-ce pas, de fonctionner dans le cadre du multimodal qui a été évoqué ici. Donc, nous allons poser la question à Madame Fatima, qui est conseillère du réseau marocain, qui a, je crois, réalisé il n'y a pas longtemps le TGV, le train à grande vitesse, qu'elle nous parle, n'est-ce pas, de ce qui se passe là-bas, l'expérience marocaine. La première question, elle est écrite en anglais, bien sûr. Customers' demand indicates that goods and services are to be moved from origin to destination seamlessly. This demand is driving the transport subsector into the realms of intermodal transport solution. Looking across the subsectors, how realistic is this demand and how can it be implemented?
Merci, Monsieur le modérateur. Merci, Mesdames et Messieurs. Et donc, c'est très... Ah, d'accord. Merci. C'est bon? C'est bon. Merci, Monsieur le modérateur. Mesdames et Messieurs, je suis très honorée de participer avec vous à ce panel qui est... donc, on intervient après une journée où on a débattu en long et en large la mobilité en Afrique. Le panel qui vient de se terminer, il a abordé des questions pertinentes, mais là, on complète par des questions beaucoup plus opérationnelles, si je me permets de le dire. Donc, la mobilité, moi, je dirais que la mobilité, c'est une mobilité qui doit être adaptée. Le rail, certes, c'est structurant, c'est fédérateur, c'est l'épine dorsale, comme il a été dit par monsieur le modérateur, c'est l'épine dorsale des transports, mais il faut quand même une mobilité adaptée à l'activité économique. Un point qu'on n'a pas abordé, c'est l'utilité économique. Les choses qui ne sont pas d'une utilité économique, qui n'apportent pas de valeur, elles ne sont pas viables à long terme. Donc, qu'est-ce qu'on transporte? Le rail a ses particularités, elle a son domaine d'excellence. Par contre, on ne fait pas que les rails sans la route, sans l'avion, sans le maritime. C'est en fonction de la situation du pays, c'est en fonction de l'évolution économique, ce qu'on veut en faire, que le choix de la mobilité est dicté. Un autre paramètre qui intervient dans le choix de quelle mobilité choisir, c'est celui de où sont situés les pôles économiques et de quel transport on parle. Parce que pour moi, sincèrement, le transport, c'est 3 activités distinctes. Quand on parle de la transport de personnes, c'est vraiment un transport qui nécessite une stratégie à part et une mobilité adaptée au flux des personnes. Est-ce que c'est de l'urbain? Est-ce que c'est de l'intercity? Et les cities, ils sont à quelle distance, c'est-à-dire entre elles, les pôles économiques? Si on est à 600 km, c'est différent quand on est à 200 km de distance. Donc, c'est vraiment l'adaptation d'abord pour la stratégie pour les voyageurs. Le deuxième point qui est aussi important et qui dicte quel mode de transport choisir, c'est le fret. Quelle est l'activité économique du pays? Qu'est-ce qu'elle produit? Et le sens, c'est-à-dire le flux origine-destination de ces flux. Donc, est-ce que c'est vers les ports ou bien c'est vers l'intérieur? Et quelle est la taille critique? Si on est en train de parler de quelques tonnes, je peux vous dire, messieurs, c'est en train faire des trains de wagons isolés, ça prouve que ce n'est pas rentable et ce n'est pas adapté. Donc le train, il est bon qu'on des trains complets avec une taille critique. Sinon, la route, il est le mieux adapté. Et le troisième axe qui est différent quand on parle de marchandises, ce n'est pas quand on parle de minerais. Les minerais ont leur logique et c'est un mode de transport très particulier et qui est rentable. Donc là, l'utilité économique est un point important dans le choix du mode de transport. Je vous en parle par rapport à une expérience que j'ai eu la chance de vivre au chemin de fer du Maroc, parce qu'on était parti d'un chemin de fer où, au début des années 80, qui était en cessation de paiement, je me permets de vous dire, à aujourd'hui un chemin de fer rentable. Et là, il y a, parce qu'on a mené une stratégie différente pour chaque axe de mobilité. Pour les voyageurs, intercity. Pour l'urbain, c'est à part. Et pour les marchandises, c'est-à-dire les marchandises soit minerais, soit marchandises diverses, différentes. Donc, par rapport à ce point-là, c'est vraiment, je reviens à dire, chaque cas est un cas à part, mais l'utilité économique doit être là. Et l'état des lieux de l'opérateur sur place est importante. Donc, il faut s'appuyer sur le réseau local, et ce réseau local doit être assigné performant, mais aussi, c'est-à-dire au service de la politique publique.
Merci beaucoup. La question à M. Simplice Esso de Citarai est What can be done to increase railways coverage in African countries? The belief is that railways is competitive within a set of distance with other aspects taken into consideration. Even at that, the railways are still not able to cover and dominate in its niche area. What can be responsible for this lackluster performance for the railways? Can intermodal solution assist?
Merci, monsieur le modérateur. Mesdames et messieurs, bonsoir. Je suis ravi d'être là ce soir pour parler de chemin de fer. Je suis Simplice Esso, directeur général de Citarai. Je vais rapidement dire qu'est-ce qu'est Citarai. Citarai, c'est une concession ferroviaire qui a été signée en 1995 par les États du Burkina et l'État de Côte d'Ivoire pour gérer la ligne historique Abidjan-Ouagadougou, qui a été construite depuis 1904. C'est la seule ligne historique qui existe, qui fonctionne, parce qu'il y a un opérateur qui existe, qui est le groupe AGL, donc qui est en concession avec les États du Burkina et de la Côte d'Ivoire. Donc voilà brièvement présenter Citarai. Et sans me répéter, sans ajouter un peu à ce que madame disait, dans tout déplacement de marchandises, il y a une logique de marché. Il faut qu'on perçoive. Satisfaire quel besoin, à quel rythme et pourquoi on le fait. Et c'est cette logique de marché aujourd'hui qui, tout à l'heure, j'écoutais monsieur le ministre du Burundi, nous sommes tous convaincus qu'il faut du chemin de fer en Afrique. Nous sommes tous convaincus. Moi, je ne rentre pas dans les... J'évite les débats de standards, métriques. Pour moi, si vous avez un chemin de fer, même à 60 cm, rendez-le efficient, optimal, d'abord, avant de passer aux standards et aux routes. Parce que pour moi, c'est comme ça que je vois. On a tendance, et moi, pour ce que je vis comme des débats, beaucoup de sujets sont pollués. Dès lors que vous parlez de chemin de fer qui existe, que vous voulez rendre performant, on vous dit, mais pourquoi vous ne construisez pas le standard? Vous êtes encore au stade archaïque. Je dis non. Construisons les choses étape par étape. On a un chemin de fer qui est métrique. On rend ce métrique performant, qui va répondre aux besoins du fret, du voyageur, dans un certain environnement, sur une échelle de long moyen terme. Et ensuite, si le marché le permet, on ferait un train encore plus rapide pour répondre aux besoins. Mais à force de mélanger les sujets, on oublie que le chemin de fer, il est coûteux en CAPES. Moi, je suis un opérateur. 1 km de voie standard, ça n'a rien à voir avec 1 km de voie métrique. Ça n'a rien à voir avec 1 km de voie à train à grande vitesse. C'est trois choses totalement différentes. Mais pour les besoins de nos économies, ceux qui ont déjà des chemins de fer qui existent, moi je pense que la première des choses des politiques, c'est de les rendre déjà opérationnels et fonctionnels. À ce que ces chemins de fer jouent leur rôle en toute ta capacité. Ensuite, ils auront le temps de voir ce qui va se passer par la suite. Moi je le dis parce que Je suis sur un chemin de fer qui fait Abidjan-Ouaga. Le Burkina est un pays de l'interland qui a à peu près 4 corridors. En marchandises générales, vous avez 8 millions de tonnes qui vont sur le Burkina. À peu près 2 millions en Côte d'Ivoire, 2 millions au Ghana, 2 millions et demi à Lomé et 1,5 million à Cotonou. Mais quand vous êtes dans le général cargo de marchandises diverses, mais ce n'est pas en construisant une ligne de chemin de fer avec 2 millions de tonnes que vous allez pouvoir rembourser les investissements et puis rembourser la rentabilité du matériel que vous allez acheter. Donc, à un moment donné, c'est un partage mixte entre le pouvoir public qui vient en appui de l'infrastructure, qui supporte une partie de l'infrastructure avec l'argent public, qui permet aux opérateurs privés de faire l'investissement sur le matériel roulant, parce que vous êtes bien d'accord avec moi. Aucune banque privée ne va me prêter de l'argent pour aller construire un chemin de fer dans nos pays sur 50 ans. Je ne sais pas. Ça n'existera pas. Donc, un peu, c'est dans cette logique-là que nous, opérateurs, on souhaite que les États comprennent cette situation. L'infrastructure appartient aux États. Il appartient aux États de la rendre efficiente et efficace en modernisant l'infrastructure qui existe. Ensuite, le marché va permettre aux opérateurs privés de faire leur part de rente en achetant des wagons, en cherchant des clients, en développant des zones économiques. Voilà un peu dans la démarche dans laquelle nous sommes aujourd'hui, sur laquelle nous travaillons. Et je voulais rappeler pour conclure qu'aujourd'hui, ce chemin de fer est créé en 1904. Il ne s'est jamais arrêté de fonctionner, sauf quand il y a la crise en Côte d'Ivoire. Voilà un peu pour dire qu'il continue de fonctionner.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Directeur Général.
Le suivant est Mr. Wakasenza Stefan, Acting Managing Director of Uganda Railways Corporation. The question to you is, the rehabilitation of the narrow gauge is ongoing with the bank support. There is need to develop the SGR between Malaba and Kampala as well. How is the project being managed as regards to financial strain on the country resource with interoperability considerations?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I bring warm greetings from Uganda. We are in an interesting environment right now with the need to rehabilitate the meter gauge, which is ongoing, but also to embrace SGR, which is a continental objective. What are we doing? If you're looking at the meter gauge, it's 1,622 kilometers. 260 are operational. 375 kilometers are being rehabilitated. This is Tororo Gulu. The main line, which is Kampala, which is operational, Kampala-Malaba, is 250 kilometers. Now, we know very well that the cost of rehabilitation and or construction is huge. Right now, if you're looking at the standard gauge, you're looking at between 2.8 to 3.2 billion US dollars for only 272 kilometers. So what has we as Uganda done? We are looking at phasing the rehabilitation. We are rehabilitating in phases and allocating resources accordingly, other than biting something bigger than we can chew. So right now, under the African Development Bank, we are going to, there is a facility of 301 million US dollars. But that is only 80% is going to track rehabilitation. What are we doing? We are looking at track rehabilitation of meter gauge, but there are certain components which cut across. For example, a railway training school. It's not training only for meter gauge. It's training for the railway subsector. Skilling, tooling, all that is, we are looking at it that right now, as we wait for standard gauge to come on board, we use the facilities that we have, but make sure that they cater for standard gauge when it comes on board. And if you're looking at standard gauge, we have not yet started. We are in discussion. And we are looking at our neighbors who have also borrowed the same concept. Rehabilitate the meter gauge, as you wait for standard gauge to come on board. What does it do? For example, the meter gauge will help you move the cargo or the equipment, the railway equipment, but also you continue serving the customers. We have big customers. For example, roofings. Their steel coils are over 22 tons. That means that their factory runs longer than when you bring a coil which is 16 ton. We have to maintain this relationship with our customers as we wait for the bigger picture to come in on board. So our approach is to phase the financing, and we thank African Development Bank for coming on board with this facility, and we call upon the bank also to look at the standard gauge component because it's around the corner. I submit.
Thank you, Mr. Stephen. So, for Mr. Hulasani Makuva from DBC, kindly take us through a few railway deals that you have been involved with. How do you compare with other infrastructure engineering finance? What will be the advice or started guidelines that can be followed to make this process less painful?
Thank you, Program Director. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity. I come from the Development Bank of Southern Africa. So thank you to our colleagues, our partners at AFDB for inviting us. I think as we always say, we're not competitors in the region. We are partners because the infrastructure gap is quite massive for any one of us to address. So we welcome the opportunity. I think from the DBSA side, I mean, we are involved collectively in about 13 rail projects in the continent, largely in the SADC region, where it's around 11 that we're actively working on. And it's quite a portfolio of projects that we're looking at. So you will have what we call, firstly, the sort of the fully government-supported projects. We involve in quite a number of those. And of course, those are easy projects for any financial institution, to target, because we know, the government will say, look, here's a guarantee, give us the money, you're covered. So everyone will jump at those opportunities. We do have projects where, in the SADC region, where in fact government has actually spent upfront and they said reimburse us. So that's easy for anyone. All the banks are there. You then also have your sort of triple P projects, which are quite large. I think we can mention it. It's out there, it's public. We've invested now, we're about to conclude $200 million on Lobito. It was mentioned earlier. You've got, large investors who are operators, who are traders, and they've got deep pockets. Those are very attractive projects. But what you then find as well in the region is you do have rail operators or even private sector players that have very, very good, strong, solid management who perhaps have just inherited, institutions that, for many years, for different reasons, are not where they ought to be today. And those are the ones where we're saying, how do we adopt a different approach as the DBSA? And a number of them fall within that realm, where we say, as a rail operator or as a rail authority in a country, what is your biggest value in terms of bankability? And the simple fact is that that is your volumes. You've got your customers, you're operating in your country, you know exactly who the customers are. But I think what is disheartening is that you will find that customers at some point, because of these years of underinvestment and neglect, they will tell you upfront, well, we're not really interested in entering into any agreement with you or increasing the current capacity because you have promised us in the past. So, and that is where we really then find the challenge, where you now have a chicken and egg situation where the banker will sit and say, well, show me a signed offtake agreement that I can bank on. But on the other side, you find that your customer is not willing to enter into, a 15, 18, 20-year agreement with you because they're just not sure whether or not you can deliver because they've heard the story in the past. So what we've tried to do as the GBSA now is we're saying, you also need to assist us to assist you as well. In that when you're having these early stage conversations with your customers, bring us on board as well. It does not help to have a beautiful business plan which says, you're going to need X number of rolling stock, locomotives, wagons, you've spent quite a bit on the feasibility studies and so forth, but at the end of the day, you still don't have those offtakes. So what we've been trying to do now is from the onset, we're saying, when you talk to your customers, invite us to the table so that we can also explain directly from the lender side to say, this is what we're looking for. It does not have to be commitment at this stage. We are still going through our own processes. How can we work together such that we can find a way of marrying the two? Because no funds can be dispersed up until a point where there is a signed contract. I think everyone in this room knows this and appreciates that. But then how do you marry the two so that the two can run in parallel? And that's what we've been trying to do. And I think with all our, we can call them clients, I think they've really started to embrace this approach. We're starting to have a lot more engagements with the customers because the volumes are there. There is, in fact, in most of the meetings that we have, there is significantly much more volumes than what some of our clients are actually, projecting, than what they're putting into their financial projections. Someone will say, look, we just need $1 billion or $2 here and there just to get a few rolling stock and then we're back on business. But then you also say, but well, what about the below? What about the actual infrastructure? There's a lot of focus on rolling stock. What conversations are then happening in terms of open access and getting, private sector participants? There's a lot that is happening. I think we in the region, I don't think we share enough. I think there's still that secrecy. So some of these things you just find by chance. Some it's through engagements. But I think we need to be transparent as well. If you are having different ideas, yes, we embrace ideas, but don't leave the other part or the other participant in the table outside up until a point where you realize you don't have a choice but to engage these people. So we really encourage that we if there's one message that I can leave here is please bring us early. We found that even your customers, they appreciate that because then you have the banker on the table as well, which always helps. So I think I'll pause the program director. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ulisani from DBSA. Now to Mr. Roni Ntuli from Telo Company. The rolling stock leasing platform is an aspect that is gaining ground in the African continent with a few organizations offering the services. As one of those playing in this field, what are the ambitions in the near and far future? Can this be linked to international solutions?
Thank you very much, moderator. Firstly, to express gratitude to the AFDB for putting the conference, the Transportation Forum together, and for having us. So I think, the Honorable Minister from Burundi raised some critical important issues. One. Two, I think there's a wealth of knowledge in the previous panel and this panel about railways. So I'll try and save us all a bit of time. The first, and just raise a couple of points. The first one is, as a continent, we have no choice, and this is why I refer to the minister, we have no choice but to build transportation and logistics infrastructure on the continent. Why? Because unless we do, we will not industrialize. Fact. That's one. Two, and I think as my colleague from the DBSA said, we have to face the ghost. The reality is there's a trust deficit. Governments so far, in most part, have insisted on hoarding the railway sector. There is a definite trust deficit in the capacity of national railway operators to execute. Three, the reality about railways is it's capital intensive and it's skills intensive. The world has moved on since these traditional railway corridors were built. If we're going to upgrade and most importantly achieve operational efficiencies, and it has to be about operational efficiencies, that's what the freight owners are looking for, and that's what the passengers are looking for. If we're going to achieve that outcome, because of the capital intensive nature and the skills intensive nature, it is inevitable that we have to bring in private sector capacity to support mobilization of capital and to support mobilization of skills and expertise. We have to migrate, therefore, towards efficient management of infrastructure, efficient management of train operations. We have to build the capacity to regulate and oversee the railway sector. Let me end there. Thank you very much. So the last point is that it's very possible, and this is my one regret about the continent. Whilst we are excited about developing the new railway sector on the continent, which is correct, our financing institution, and this is a criticism, our financing institutions are lumbering governments with debt where there's no clarity of repayment. I think that is very dangerous because we can go through a number of countries today that have borrowed massive amounts of money where there's no clarity on how they're going to sweat the asset and repay those liabilities. Today I was reading about a country in East Africa that is now, debt repayment has gone so unsustainable, gone through massive development of railways, have no view on how to operationalize the railways. I think it is quite dangerous. Lastly, building track and buying equipment is not railways. Railways is beyond building track and acquiring equipment.
Thank you for the quote. So, to my friend Johnny from Green Road Rail, with this drive for regional and continental operation, how are the operating companies preparing for this change? Kindly highlight issues and the solutions to any such issues with particular emphasis on interoperability and intermodality.
Yeah, good afternoon and thank you for the opportunity, ADB. Yeah, I think Ronnie has said a lot what I wanted to say, but let me add on to that. So if one looks at the railway pie within Africa, it's 95% of the goods are moving by road. So that's the potential pie to eat. So the challenge that we do have, as Roddy has also said, is the capacity. We know for a fact, myself, I'm even coming from the other side, from the public sector, running a state-owned railways for 5 years, is that you can only do so much in terms of capacity for the track and for the rolling stock. Now the private sector is ready. We're ready. I've had offers from banks to say, we want to give you money, but I don't have a project. So that's how we will solve this problem. So we need to make sure that our reforms within our countries happen in the right way and that we let loose, because who's going to be the beneficiaries here? It's us as we're sitting here. It's the consumers. So let us make that decision at public sector and say, let's allow the private sector to come in. Private sector, of course, can only go into railways if there's a long-term contract. There must be a long-term commitment. If I get a contract now of at least 15 years, we can make the project work. As Grand Road, we we just moved about 30 locomotives that was in West Africa, in Sierra Leone, for around about 5 years, where we were moving about 7 million tons of iron ore from the mine to the port. So it's a project that we started, we handed it over, and now we're going somewhere else. So it's possible. It's possible for those investments, but it can only happen through those private-public sector partnerships. We have, for instance, as a group, we logistics group, so we have even started initiatives to add value in terms of balancing the road and the rail transportation in terms of intermodal. And where we, for instance, cargo that or freight that used to be by road all the way, we've cut down around about 40% of it on road, and then we decided let's create an intermodal facility, and the 60% of that we then now moving those specific freight by rail. So the opportunity is there. It's a partnership. It's time. I think the time is there to eat the pie, but we can't eat the pie if we're not allowed to eat the pie. So that's how it is. So we're ready for that, and the banks are there. They're actually queuing. I don't know anymore how to answer them, but yeah, the opportunity is there, and let us take hands and see how we can make it work. Thank you.
Nous allons maintenant prendre une question de chaque côté pour essayer, n'est-ce pas, de réveiller encore nos panélistes. Alors, je prends de ce côté une dame, il n'y a pas le choix. Et de ce côté-ci, personne. Ah, un homme. Bien. Alors, madame.
Johnny, thank you for the commitment. And as I've said previously, the marriage between government and private sector is not that of convenience, but rather that of necessity. And in any marriage, we enter into marriage with a long-term commitment. And I hope that the contracts do come with the terms that you as business seem viable. And those terms, particularly when banks are talking to you, would like to see the Luxembourg Rail Protocol being ratified by all African member states so that it makes it cheaper for those banks to lend you money. And but in your little corner on African states, what role are you playing to ensure that the Luxembourg Rail Protocol is ratified? And is ratification DBSA, when you fund these projects, particularly the funding of a rail rolling stock, how do we get assured as Africans that your terms and conditions prioritize Africans, increasing African content on African projects funded by African money?
Merci, madame.
My question is directed at DBSA. I was quite interested in your talk about the off-takers and off-taker arrangements. Is there anything you think you should be doing as a bank or international financial organizations to make this process a bit more amenable to its implementation? It's not very easy to attract private money onto the railways, and then this off-take agreement, that's where people are saying, okay, if you do this, we'll do this. Is there any way where companies are saying, give me a railway, and if you give me this kind of a railway, I'm ready to commit to using you for the next 10, 15 years. Is there anything we can do, or you financial institutions can do to make this process easier to be able to bring private money onto the railways? Thank you.
Le dernier.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chukuma Wakama. I've had quite a lot today, quite a lot to take in, and thank you very much to all the panelists. But one thing that I've not echoed very, very strongly is the issue of maintenance. We can talk about building railways and all whatnot, but if we do not inculcate maintenance into our plant, then we are building to fail. My colleague in the not AFDB, DB, please. You did mention that railway involves a lot. And what are you doing in terms of this aspect of maintenance, and what will you advise? Secondly, I've heard quite a lot about mining, building railway for mining and goods, but also the minerals that we're taking out of Africa. If we continue in that space, what we are doing is to starve the raw material for sustainability of our railway in terms of maintenance of the future. Thank you very much.
Nous avons eu 3 questions. Qui va répondre à la première question? Who's going to respond to Madame?
Okay. I will start. It was directed to me or John?
It was to you as a bank.
I think for us as GBSA, to a very large extent, we do insist that there are goods from the African continent in most of the projects that we actually get involved in. If I can give you an example, Lobito, which was talked about, which is also public news, half of that rolling stock is actually coming from a company in South Africa. We were part of that process as well. If you look at the rail operator or the rail authority on the Transnami project as well, which is also public news, you will find that there's very significant local content in that project as well. Transnet, obviously, this is our sister DFI. We are in fact now, if not the biggest, we are the second largest lender in Transnet. Which other ones? I mean, Tanzania SGR as well, you'll find that there's local content. So in most of the projects that we get involved in, and even some of the ones that are actually live projects, all of them you'll find that there is an insistence on African content. So I think that one, I think at least we try. I think the question around the off-takers, I mean, it's quite simple enough in our view. I mean, you've got 3 players in that scheme. You've got the rail authority in the country who lacks the capacity, right? But in terms of regulation, in terms of everything else, they are mandated to operate, to look at the infrastructure to also operate, right? The cargo. So you've got the rail operator, but you've got customers, be it mines, being manufacturing facilities, it can be whoever. Those customers are in that country. But what they're saying is, well, we cannot enter into a contract with you until we are assured that there is capacity, right? You've been disappointed. So traditionally, the rail operator will come to the bank and say, I've got these contracts, but we're not seeing that. That doesn't happen anymore. It's very difficult to find that. So what we're saying is, when you talk to the bank early enough, we actually now go with the rail operator to the customer to say, we don't need to sign a contract today. Let's work on it. Sometimes even just conversations that we are having across the table, we can record those to say, okay, how do we then move forward together? Because the bank is now going to take what you as the customer is saying. Perhaps you can even sign letters of interest, etc., which are very non-committal. But that then enables the bank to go through its processes up until a point where it gets an approval. It says, okay, here's the approval from the bank. Now please sign the contract. So we mean it in that sense. So we're not saying there's any new money that necessarily has to come in. The bank is going through its own processes. But all that we're really saying is, if we're having those conversations, we're sitting in front of your customer as the rail authority, then there's a better chance that that customer might just say, okay, you as the bank proceed. And up until the day that I see that you're progressing with this application. Therefore, I will then commit to signing a contract.
I'm responding on the matter on maintenance. From experience, we have observed that maintenance is something that is not catered for even in the budgeting. So we are engaging our governments, for starters, to have that component included in there. Rail is unique in a way that it was there before government. So the issues related to policy have come after the horse. You find that we are setting up the railway policies right now, and that's where we are getting support from the African Development Bank through the facility we are taking on. But most importantly, we have had experiences where we have bought equipment, and you find that this equipment has different forms of maintenance, A, B, C, up to G, where G is disassembling the whole equipment. And you find that at the time of procurement, that was not taken into consideration. Our staff took part in skilling on television or without having hands-on. So this is one of the areas we are curing, that we include a component of if we have to procure, for example, locomotives, during the assembly, our staff are present so that they can get that skill, so that when it comes to that heavy overhaul time, they are aware of what to do. So that is one of the cures we are factored in our engagement with the bank.
Thank you very much also for the question on maintenance. I think it's really the lack of time, but maintenance is a critically important component of railways. Firstly, railways, as I mentioned, is hugely capital intensive. But to the point that my sister made earlier on, the supply chain of the railway sector itself, not only the development portion until the first train is ready to run. There's a statistic that goes, and this is an important statistic for all of us to understand. For every dollar invested in developing a railway corridor, over a 20-year period post the first train running, in operations and maintenance, a country benefits 5 times value of development. That's if you have a discipline of maintenance. So to give you an example, we have trains running in Mozambique on the Nacala corridor. Acquired those trains, all our trains in all the countries we're involved with have, our locomotives have 40% African content. Our wagons have 80% South African content. That's the beginning of an industrial value chain, from steel all the way up until that train goes to destination. Those trains can never, unlike an aeroplane, can never be flown up to Toulouse or wherever for maintenance. So it forces you to build maintenance capacity on the ground, technology, systems, processes. And this is not only on the rolling stock side. This is on the infrastructure side. This is on the signaling side. So I do think that the question is important in the sense that we can't be post-budget planning to incorporate maintenance into infrastructure. When we plan, when we do the bankable feasibility study at the start of the project, maintenance has to be a very clear cost line for life of project. Thank you.
Je crois que nous arrivons à la fin de notre session. Je voudrais d'abord rappeler que nous avons eu une première session qui a porté le débat sur la nécessité d'avoir, n'est-ce pas, le chemin de fer aujourd'hui comme une des solutions pour pouvoir bien vertébrer le continent. Aujourd'hui, avec cette seconde session, nous avons abordé les questions vraiment de la rentabilité, parce qu'il était posé, n'est-ce pas, des questions à la fois des marchés, de la réponse aux consommateurs, mais également des modalités de financement et surtout également de l'entretien des chemins de fer. Nous pensons que le débat que nous avons eu aujourd'hui permet de remettre en tout cas le chemin de fer sur les tables, n'est-ce pas, des décideurs, sur la table des bailleurs. Et je pense que la réunion de notre forum d'aujourd'hui permet à la BAD, n'est-ce pas, d'être à la fois la banque, mais également le conseiller des États, pour que dans les différents projets lancinants de chemin de fer, qu'il soit vu de manière globale toutes ces questions afin de booster vraiment le chemin de fer comme étant un des modes de transport qui devra être au rendez-vous. Nous avons beaucoup d'ambition, notamment, comme l'a dit notre collègue de l'Union africaine, avec l'agenda 2063. Il y a un courrier qui va être lancé par Madame Zuma à Kwame Nkrumah, dans lequel il faudra bien qu'il corrige et qu'il dise que nous avons complété, n'est-ce pas, des kilomètres de chemin de fer que ceux que tu avais laissés quand tu es parti. Et donc, au bout de 100 ans de l'Afrique, nous aurons doublé le chemin de fer, nous aurons connecté le continent et nous allons vraiment faire du continent un continent compétitif parce qu'avec la ZLECAf, on pourra également assurer une communication intra-africaine au-delà, n'est-ce pas, de la logique que nous avons tous relevée, qui était seulement d'exporter des produits sans assurer le développement du continent. Je voulais donc vous demander d'applaudir encore ces vaillants panélistes pour leur contribution et les remercier pour l'échange que nous avons eu. Et comme on dit aussi, applaudissez pour vous-même parce que vous avez été très disciplinés et très... Voilà.